Can pick specific areas, I suppose, but the numbers are not debatable. The average custodial sentence for an indictable offence in 1993 was 16 months, and now it's 22 and a half months. So there's been an increase in prison terms by about 40% over the last nearly 30 years, and you think there's been a reduction.
For me personally, it
but
feels
we have
like...
to stop there, because that is a beautiful illustration of the two questions that we're asking today. Here are the facts. Why do the British public believe the opposite? And you as a police officer are just denying the evidence of your own eyes and ears.
What happens when personal experience collides head-on with hard evidence? We live in an age where what people feel is increasingly treated as just as important, and sometimes even more important than what the actual numbers show. If something feels true, many people are perfectly willing to defend it, even when the evidence points in the opposite direction. But this conversation gets especially interesting when the person making the claim is a 15-year police veteran, someone whose entire professional career is built around evidence, reports, witness statements, statistics, facts, the kind of information that is supposed to separate what happened from what someone simply believes happened. And yet, when this police officer calls James to complain that criminal sentences have become far too lenient, he is about to run directly into a problem that personal experience cannot easily explain away. Because James has the numbers. Not a feeling, not a memory, not a story from one particular case. A national review examining sentencing patterns across decades. And the figures tell a very different story from the one this caller believes he has personally witnessed. This is where the discussion becomes much bigger than one disagreement about prison sentences. It becomes a perfect example of a growing political problem. What happens when someone's personal reality clashes with the evidence? Does the evidence change their mind? Or do they simply find a way to explain why the evidence must be wrong? Before we dive into the full story, comment where you're watching from, and don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Now, let's watch this exchange together, because the argument that follows reveals something fascinating about the way people understand politics, crime, and the world around them. And once we've heard the full conversation, I'll give you my thoughts on what may be the most important part of this entire debate.
Contribution, especially as did you say you were a police officer?
That's right.
Is that the sentences are longer than ever before. They've gone up by 40% since 1993, and you think that you've watched an increase in leniency.
Absolutely. So from my experience with sentences, we've often seen sort of a specific example would be around the paedophile hunters and that type of offending. A lot of suspended sentences around that type of offending, which I would ordinarily have expected custodial sentences for. I'm all for rehabilitation.
We can pick specific areas, I suppose, but the numbers are not debatable. The average custodial sentence for an indictable offence in 1993 was 16 months, and now it's 22 and a half months. So there's been an increase in prison terms by about 40% over the last nearly 30 years, and you think there's been a reduction.
For me personally,
but we have to stop there, because that is a beautiful illustration of the two questions that we're asking today. Here are the facts. Why do the British public believe the opposite? And you as a police officer are just denying the evidence of your own eyes and ears. There's been a 40% increase in prison terms. That's the severity of sentences. That's not the total number of sentences. It's gone up from 16 months to 22 and a half months. How long have you been a police officer?
15 years now.
So over the course of your career, prison sentences have got longer, and yet you're here to tell me that they've got shorter.
Absolutely. Yeah, from my experience, it seems...
You can't keep saying from my experience. This report has counted all of them, Rhys.
Yeah,
it's counted all of the sentences across all of England and Wales for all of the years between 1993 and 2025, and they've gone up by 40% in length, in severity. And yet you're here as a police officer with 15 years on the clock to say, oh, well, in my experience, the opposite is true, as if that matters.
Sorry, so are you saying from the statistics they're saying that the actual sentence is longer opposed to more people are being sent to prison?
The severity of sentences, which has led to, more people are being sent to prison as well. I thought I'd made this
What's
pretty clear in the introduction. So the number of people being sent to prison has gone up from 124 per 100,000 in the population to 139 people per 100,000 in the population. And the severity of the sentence has increased since 1993, so under Labour and the Conservatives, by 40%. And I don't want to fall out, but it doesn't matter how many times you say, in my experience, the conclusion you've arrived at as a consequence of your experience is the polar opposite.
Yeah, that seems wild that's the case. But if there's,
but it's not going to change your mind, though, is it? These bloody statistics, these numbers, these actual facts.
Well, I think we all can draw conclusions from what statistics have come from and how we arrive at them.
You can draw one conclusion, and the conclusion is that the severity of sentences has increased by 40% since 1993.
Where are these statistics from, James?
This is David Gauke, the former Justice Secretary, who spent the last 6 months looking at all of the numbers.
What a trustworthy source that is.
Well, he's not an MP.
Was he not a former MP?
He's a former MP, yes. A former Secretary of State for Justice. Well, so nominally, your boss.
I rest my case.
What case are you resting there, Rhys?
The statistics, how you want to present them is how I'd argue.
Okay, and where do you get yours from?
Ultimately, from experience.
This is from the Independent Sentencing Review.
Right. Why? The other question I'd want to know, James.
I just want to know where you get your overall national figures from, if not from the Independent Sentencing Review.
I wasn't talking from my national state. I was talking from lived experience, James, and the amount of time.
But where do you get your national figures from? Because you just said you can dismiss these. You said, I think, case closed, or I rest my case. So what is your case? Where do you get your numbers from?
I don't think they're my exact words, in fairness, James. But
you said I rest my case.
The point I make is that I think statistics can be leaned whichever way.
So which ones do you prefer?
For me personally, James,
No. For the whole country. That's what the Independent Sentencing Review. We can't all have our own statistics. You have 60 million people in the country. They all choose their own statistics. The ones that the government will use to legislate and the ones that the population uses to understand what is happening and the numbers involved. I give you the Independent Sentencing Review. You, Rhys, 15 years in the police service, give me...
I personally think for the country...
No. Where do I go? The website, the statistical collation, the expertise that has been deployed to count all of the instances that we're discussing. The Independent Sentencing Review is good enough for everybody else, but what do you use instead?
Personal experience, lived experience.
Right.
That's all I can draw from, other than a former MP giving me some statistics.
No. It's the Independent Sentencing Review that he is using to explain the facts, in some cases, obviously, pointlessly.
Well, listen, if they're the facts, they're the facts. But from my lived experience...
They're the facts, but I know better from my lived experience.
No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying from my lived experience...
It is what you're saying. It's exactly what you're saying. I've given you 5 opportunities now to tell me where we should go instead of the Independent Sentencing Review, and you've said my lived experience.
I can only go from my lived experience.
No. You can go from the audited, collected statistical facts that deploy countless people to determine exactly what is going on in the country. You can go to that, or you can just go to your lived experience, and that's fine. I've done my best, and there it is. I mean, if you get arrested by Rhys later today, great news. You're going to get a really lenient sentence. If you get arrested in the real world, you're probably going to get a sentence that's 40% longer than it would have been in 1993. And there it is, the most perfect, albeit unintentional, answer to the question of why does the British public believe things that are demonstrably untrue? Because of, what was it again? Lived experience.
Wow. That was a masterclass in how a personal reality bubble gets built and then defended against the facts. Rhys called in convinced that criminal sentences had become far too lenient, but James presented a very inconvenient problem. The data showed that average custodial sentences had actually increased by roughly 40% since 1993. So what was the response? Not that data is wrong. Not here is another national study. Just one phrase. For me personally. And that is the entire problem. Personal experience can tell you what you have seen. It cannot automatically tell you what is happening across an entire country. You may remember several cases where sentences seemed shockingly lenient, but that does not erase decades of national statistics. And when James asked for an alternative source, there wasn't one. just more personal experience. That is how political reality bubbles survive. The evidence says one thing, the feeling says another. And instead of changing the feeling, people start looking for reasons to dismiss the evidence. And James's final point was brutally effective. If you get arrested by Reese, apparently you're in luck. You're going to get a very lenient sentence. But in the real world, according to the figures being discussed, the average custodial sentence is roughly 40% longer than it was in 1993. And there it is, the battle between what is statistically true and what simply feels true. That battle is shaping politics in 2026, and the frightening part is that facts don't always win. So what do you think? Is personal experience enough to challenge national statistics, or should the evidence settle the argument? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more political commentary. Thanks for watching.